I feel a little intimidated.
Yeah, right.
All right, is everyone excited for a seminar between Lanny Benoit and Rick Labbe? Yeah. All right.
All right, you guys, here's what happens when I'm driving down a logging road. And I park side the road and somebody shows up and they walk over to my rig and they want to know who I am, and I always have my alias ready. And I always call myself Clyde Bobar.
Yeah, here with Lanny.
My alias is Clyde Bobar, but I'm really Lanny Benoit. You know why I do that? Because I don't want to be there for an hour. I want to go hunting. So after a while, what happens, they start to walk away and they turn around and come back and they look at me. I don't think your name's Clyde Bobar. So we have a lot of fun hunting. Go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, we do. So anyway, to me, he's my idol. Who I am today was because of this guy. I followed him from the time I was 15, 16 years old, and he was the greatest deer hunter on earth to me. So to have him here is an honor.
It didn't take you long to pick it up, though. I remember when you were just a little guy.
First time I met him, I'm coming down the Hardscrubber Road, and we had, I don't know, maybe a foot of snow. We used to get a lot of snow back then. It was always cold weather. And coming down the Hardscrubber Road, and I'm doing like 40, 45 miles an hour, and he's coming in this white Suburban doing about 45 miles an hour, and I'm like, who's going to make the bridge first? I gave up.
Talk about bridges. I got bridge stories too, but you keep going. I like your stories. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, so that was, I pulled over and we met. And another story, I got to tell this because you could be the greatest deer tracker on earth, and if you can't shoot, you'll never get recognized, right? If you can't kill deer, nobody's going to know who you are. So one day I drove down into a gravel pit, and I heard a bunch of shooting going on, and it was kind of pre-season first week, and him and his brother Lane and his other brother Shane were down there. His dad weren't there, and they were throwing up bean cans and shooting them with a rifle. And I said, what the hell? I said, you shooting them with a rifle? Yeah, he says, you get good at that. And he says, you get pretty good at shooting a running buck then. And he says, if you can't shoot them, you can't kill them. He says, you're never gonna be a good hunter. And that stuck in my head. So I always shot a lot growing up. And like I said, those little tricks that I watched, he didn't know I was watching, but I was watching, So to me, if somebody in here, if I inspire somebody like he did me, we did our job, right? So
it's kind of comical. It's throwing up stuff in the air, shooting it. Can you guys hear me? Okay. This guy stops by the shop one day and he had a 243 with a scope on it. Wanted to go woodchuck hunting. Oh, and he just wanted to show me how good his gun shot. And so all the time we're riding around, he keeps telling me, you got to shoot my gun. You don't realize how good this 243 shoots. I said, well, we'll see a woodchuck. I'll shoot it for you if you want. So we never saw a woodchuck. So finally we were way back up in the woods there, and I said, what do you got in here? And he had a can of something there, and I think it was spaghetti or something just happened in the rig. I said, well, I want to shoot your gun. He said, but I can't, there's no distance around here. It's right in the woods beside the road. I just grab the can, will you? So we go out, and I put a shell in the gun, and I said, throw it up. What do you mean throw it up? Aren't you going to shoot my gun? Yeah, I'm going to shoot your gun. I want to see how it shoots. So he tossed it up in the air, and I went pow, and I went poof. I said, boy, this thing's right on. Here's your gun back. You know what he called me? Called me an asshole. He had the word in front of the F word in front of it.
Yeah. So let's get into some deer tracking tactics. My number one way I kill all my big bucks, and I learned it from watching this guy, is pre-scouting logging roads, and he'll tell you he does the same thing 90% of the time. If we can't find a tracker, I know there's a big buck in a block of woods, I'm going to walk in there, hike in, make a big loop, see if I can find his tracks. But 90% of the time, I'm hunting logging roads, and I'm pre-scouting. Usually I like to find 2 or 3 big bucks before the season, so I got a backup. If one don't work out or somebody shoots them, I got another big buck I can go look for and jump on right away.
You always need a backup
You always need a backup. Yeah.
if you want to kill big bucks.
I use Onyx now a lot to hunt by, especially when I get on a track or I find a track in the morning. I'm pre-scouting a logging road in a brand new area. If I'm in the area I hunt all the time, you really don't need it. But anywhere you go to a new location, Onyx it's just like having a gazetteer right in your hand all the time. And you pull that up and it shows you that whole mountain range, all the contours. And you got all these options, all these map layers in Onyx that you can pull up, and you got thermal cover, conifers, crops, leaf imagery, all this stuff. And once you learn how to use that, it's huge. So I use Onyx a lot, especially when I find a track in an unknown area, and I'll look at it and say, oh, I can drive around this mountain range. And if it's let's say 2 miles through this block of woods, which is nothing for a big buck, Lanny will tell you, 2 miles through there and there's another logging road, I'm gonna drive around and definitely check that, make sure that big buck's in that block of woods. Because I don't want to waste my time. And I'll tell you a little story why. Back when I was like in my early 20s, I found this really big buck track. And I was in on the side of Coburn Mountain. And I decided, I said, that's fresh. I'm going to jump right on it. And I kind of knew in my head I should drive around. And I said, no, that's fresh. So I spent 2 hours tracking that buck over that mountain. And guess whose truck I came to on his track on the other side? So I had to walk all the way back. And I think you killed that deer.
I apologize.
I would have helped you drag if you'd said something.
I can tell you one thing, he's right on that. If you're going to be a good buck hunter, and you know where 3 Slides is.
Oh, yeah.
I got a story about 3 Slides. Back then we had our buses down in a gravel bank.
Right.
I drive all the way up to 3 Slides, and here's this great big buck track. And he's headed down the road. He's headed east. I said to the guy with me, I said, why don't we just go check to see if he's crossed the road down there? Well, guess what? He crossed the road. He crossed another road. Pretty soon we're all the way down where the spring is. He crossed right where the spring is on that road.
Right.
Then he headed up, and there was a road that used to go up there. We drove up there. Now, how far is that from 3 Slides?
Probably 5 miles.
Yeah. Now we get out, and we tracked this deer, and he headed for the Forks.
Yeah.
I got back at 7 o'clock that night and never caught that deer.
Yeah.
So some of these deer, they take off and go.
They do.
And that's the young fellows that's got to be in good shape if you want to catch the deer. You know, when you say you never ran after a deer, well, back when I was younger, I didn't mind doing that. Now I don't do that. I don't do much running anymore. I run for my sandwiches or something. But that's
we hunt smarter now that we get older. So
yeah.
That's another thing we're pre-scouting. Once you find that big buck track, if you can narrow him down and actually drive around that last block where his track went into, he's in that block of woods. So you know when you get on his track, you are going to jump that buck by the end of the day, and you're probably going to shoot him. You're going to get a shot at him.
Well, that's like that one at 3 Slides. If we started tracking him up there, where were we going to go with it?
Yeah, you'd have never found him.
Tracked him with the vehicle half the day. And
Right.
I got a question. Do you use Onyx?
no.
No. So how'd you use to find the big tracks?
Well, years ago when we had a lot of big bucks in the state of Maine and Vermont, you didn't ride around much because you didn't have the logging roads like you got here in Maine. But in Maine, you had these logging roads that went everywhere. And years ago, back in the early 70s, when I first started hunting up here, shooting a big buck, when you started out in Vermont and you headed to Maine, you didn't wonder if you're going to shoot a buck. You just wondered how big it was going to be. That's how many deer you had back then in the state of Maine. That day's all gone now. But yeah, I still drive around some first and look for a big buck track. I found some last year that were pretty big, and the problem is that it took me quite a while to find what I was looking for last year. So, but no, I don't use Onyx. but I should. You know what? I've hunted so much the areas around that I've hunted in Maine. I know what's on the other side of the mountain.
Right.
Anyway, so.
Yeah. I don't use Onyx hardly ever in Maine.
No,
But
I don't.
like I'm saying, everywhere else to go, and anybody new to a new area, Onyx is huge.
And when I was a young fella, believe it or not, I never had a compass, didn't care. And even to this day, I don't care, because if I'm coming out over there, that's what I'm doing. Because once you get on a big buck track, you're going to go until you get exhausted, or...
You're going to go where he brings you.
I shot a buck one time in Vermont. When I killed that deer, he fell over there and I fell over here. And I laid there for maybe a half hour just recuperating and getting my breath back. That's how hard I pushed that deer. And that deer actually charged me because he was sick of me running him around. It's a true story. I'm not exaggerating at all. When I shot that deer, he was right there coming after me. Had his head down. He was going to get me because he was sick of it.
Yeah, I had one do that once.
Yeah, you know how your dog will chase him for a while and they turn on the dog, a big buck. So when I shot him right there, right over the neck, and he piled up and I went... But that's what you have to do when you're young and full of... You know, quite a few years ago, I couldn't figure out what was going on, because years ago when I went up a hill like this, I'd look back and all the trees are bent this way, the small ones. So when I got older, they were bent that way, and then I figured it out because I'm pulling on them to get up there.
Been up there a few times.
Yeah. Now it takes me forever to get top of the mountain.
Right.
As far as finding snow, what kind of things do you guys look for to try to find where you can actually go even find a track? Know if there is snow in a certain area.
Yeah, we look for elevation. So especially early in the season, you always want to get up in that upper elevation somewhere in the mountains. You're going to have a lot better snow earlier. The other thing I do is I use my webcams on a lot of gas stations. Like there's one over in Eustis at the Pines. There's one in Jackman. And sometimes you'll get 2 inches of snow in Eustis, and you'll only get, a half an inch over in Jackman or something. So I'm going to say, hey, I'm heading to Eustis today because that's where the snow is to track. So those webcams are huge, when you're heading out in the morning.
Yeah, you really need snow if you want to have fun. Sitting shooting a deer, I'll tell you what, I got a lot of patience, or whatever you want to call it, respect for people that can sit all day. Because when I tried sitting a bunch of times when we were doing camera work, and Tommy wanted to sit here one day, and I said, well, this is a good spot. And what happened, I'd always fall asleep. So if I'm sitting by myself, I fall asleep every time. It don't matter. For some reason, when I sit down, I go to sleep. And that happened to me in Ontario. I said, boy, look at this deer trail right here. So there was a perfect tree, and I leaned up against it and laying there, and I fell asleep. Well, guess what woke me up? Big buck walked right up next to me and looking at me, and he goes, what's this thing? He blew at me right there. He scared the shit out of me. I was sound asleep. Didn't even get a shot at him. He took off running. I said, that don't work. And I can tell you a story about my dad years ago, Jay Peak. He dragged me all the way up on the side of the mountain back in the early 60s, and he said, every time I jump that buck out, he runs right through this notch right here. So, Lanny, I want you to sit right here, and I'm going to go up and jump him out, and you shoot him when he comes by. I said, okay, Pop. I sat there, and pretty soon he's yelling at me. I was sleeping. The tracks was right by.
That sound familiar, Nancy?
Oh, yeah.
So,
I can't sit down. I fall asleep.
I do too.
Yeah.
I don't care how cold it is, I fall asleep. I think I can sleep like them guys do on TV under a spruce tree out in the wilderness. That's just TV shows, they do that.
Yeah, they do that on purpose.
Yeah.
Right. So we don't have a whiteboard, so we won't talk about that. But getting on a track, so doing your homework, like we talked about, that's wicked important, especially 2 or 3 days before the season starts, especially if we got snow. I'm going to go up and pre-scout those areas. I'm going to locate 2 or 3 big bucks. So, like I said, I got 2 or 3 big bucks I can go after. They might be 10 miles apart, sometimes 20 miles apart, but I can go to this mountain range or that mountain range. And most generally, the bucks me and Lanny want to kill on a mountain range, there's only 1 or 2.
Okay.
So you're looking for kind of a needle in a haystack, but once you've done it long enough, you kind of know where to look, and you go back to the old crossings, and you learn those crossings from just years and years of looking, and mostly years of tracking, where they're going to take you. And
They've followed it for generations.
Generations, 100%. Yeah.
And just to back up what you're saying, my camera guy Tommy and I were tracking this big buck, and we spent 2 days on him. He's pretty wild. We couldn't seem to get up on him. Finally, he says, we're not getting any footage. I said, well, I know there's another one. Backup spot, you're saying? I said, we go down there about 10 miles away. There's a good buck down there. So we went down and shot that one within a half an hour. So You need a backup.
Yeah.
It's that one if you watch the video, I hit a big rock as I'm shooting at him way out there. You see the dust fly off the rock. But the shot before that, I hit the deer. So we tried dragging the rock out. That didn't work either.
So
excuse me. Go ahead.
I gotta have him tell the story. I told it earlier out in the lobby about you. He was on a track. He started up there near Pleasant Ridge or something, and he headed towards Flagstaff Lake. And so tell that story.
Well, I started a buck over the Sandy Creek area, and I don't know if anybody knows where that is. It's the other side of Pleasant Ridge. And I took him all the way over to whatever that lake was.
Yeah, over by Flagstaff area.
Yeah.
There's quite a poke across there through the woods. It was probably 7-8 miles.
Yeah, anyways, I couldn't hear Shane shoot his gun at 4 o'clock, and I shot mine. He couldn't hear me. Couldn't talk to each other on walkie-talkies. That's how far away it was. But meanwhile, this buck, he kept trying to cross the lake, but he couldn't because he'd break through the ice and he'd have to come back. And I was wading in water up to here, so I got pretty soaking wet just going through the spruces and pine trees, tracking this buck all day. Finally, the buck made a big mistake. The water went like this. There's a cove on both sides, and the land went out and stopped right there. And what happened, the buck went out there, and I could see ice over here, and I could see ice over there, and I could hear him up there. I said, well, this is where it ends right here. And I felt bad for him because, I like a deer dead when I go up. I don't like him looking at me or nothing. So anyways, he's coming back, and I can hear him coming back. So I'm walking towards him, and then I didn't hear him anymore. And from here to that wall right over there, I spotted him laying down like a doggy does with his head on the ground, looking at me. And I hate that when they're like that, because so.
You wore him out.
I did.
Yeah.
Actually, I wore this deer out so bad, he was sitting down once in a while on his haunches in the back with his hind feet up. So I pushed him pretty hard all day. So I ended up shooting him. I told him, I see you, and I shot him. I actually said that to that deer. He was right there. I said, I see you right there, and I felt bad, and I shot him. And so now I go down this lake. I go down the old logging road there, and I went to the end of the lake, and I could hear a hammer going bang, bang, bang on something on a roof. So I go out there, and I'm soaking wet. I can't stand outside very long because it was cold that afternoon. It was the end of the season. So I look up, and the guy's on the roof, and I told him I needed a ride. Finally, he come down off the roof, and he said, why do you need a ride? I said, well, I came from Pine Grove Lodge over that way. Well, how'd you get here? I said, well, I tracked a buck over here. Is that you shooting up by the lake? I said, yeah, I just shot a big buck up there. And he looked at me, and he says, well, who the hell do you think you are, Lanny Benoit? I says, matter of fact, I am Lanny Benoit, and I need a ride. And if you give me a ride, you gonna eat beer? He comes out, he had 3 beers, and they're all different brands. That's all he had.
That give you heartburn?
So he gave me a ride back, and he went like 2 miles an hour. I wanted to say, get out of there. I'll drive this thing. Because it was an hour and a half to Bob's place. That's how far away it was. Way back in there. And there was nobody around, so I had to pay him to do it too. He should have just given me a ride, but
right, you had to pay him, and he told me, he says, I finally had him convinced that I was Lanny Benoit by the time he dropped me off.
Well, the funny part about it, there was a gate, And you couldn't drive in there, so I got lucky. I found the woman that had a key for that, and she was all excited. She was going to unlock the gate and go drag the deer out. And she's going to need a chainsaw, too, because there's logs across the road. Nobody's been on that road for a while. So it was a pretty good adventure, and then the guy saw the deer. But adventures and going deer hunting, you have a lot of adventures if you do it right. Have fun and have some luck.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why tracking to me is the biggest adventure that you could do in the outdoors, because all day long you've got a big buck in front of you, right? And it's the adventure really is finding the track and following the track. It's all over when you shoot the deer, but the whole adventure is following that big buck all day and learning his habits and whatnot. So I don't know if we never talked about this much, but I leave the track when I think that buck's going to do something, make a turn or something, and I think I can cut him off. Do you do that?
I've done it a couple of times. I had one come back looking for me because I cut off his track. I finally caught on what he was doing. He'd going like this, and he did a hook, and he'd be watching up on a little ledgy type thing.
They do that a lot.
Yeah. So anyways, I'm looking way out there, and I see that the land went like this. I said, all right, I'm sick of this guy. So I went up here and snuck across there. It was nice and quiet. And I got up there just in time. He was coming back, looking down over the bank, looking for me, and he went like this. Oops.
Yeah, it's too late.
Too late.
Yeah, I probably shot not half, but damn close to half, leaving the track, cutting the buck off. And like he said, they want to. A buck don't want to run all day long. He wants to go back about his business, doing his thing. Just like us, we don't want somebody chasing us running all day long. You just want to get rid of them. So he's going to constantly keep stopping, and all bucks are different. Some might run a mile straight, stretched right out, and then they'll just stop dead, and they're going to watch and wait about 20 to 30 minutes. Then they're going to go right back about doing their business. So, and other bucks won't run very far, and they'll keep looping, and usually from a high spot. So once they've done that 2 times, I'm looping, and I've shot a lot of them, and they didn't know I was there. And the other thing it gives you, they don't expect you coming from a different angle than on their backtrack. No. So they're focused on that backtrack, and when you come at an angle, it kind of catches them off guard. It gives you that 2 or 3 seconds. Boom, you got him, he's dead.
Do you guys realize that you can almost tell the age of a deer by looking at his track after you walk behind him a little bit? Want me to let you know how to do that? It's pretty easy. Start with when a buck is 2.5, a year and a half, they got big feet. Even 3.5-year-old deer, they got big feet, and they walk like this more. So when you see them going like this, we call them flat-footers because the older they get, pretty soon they're going like this with their feet. They start getting flat-footed. The dew claws spread out a little bit more in the back. That means you're tracking probably a 6 or 7, 8-year-old buck. He's got the best rack he's ever going to have. They'll have good racks up until 10 or 11, believe it or not, as long as their teeth are good and they got good food. So now you know you got something. And if you're not sure how good his rack is, when he walks through 2 trees this big, they always have 1 foot that steps out and does that when they go through there. And they're going this way. That means he's got a decent rack. If he just walks straight through it, guess what? He ain't got much for horns. Just turn around and go back to the truck.
Right. Go look for another one.
Yeah, go look for another one. And one thing I've never got a hang of, and I know I'm talking too much, after I get done shooting a deer, I never learn how to twirl my gun like they do on TV.
I might have done that by accident once.
Yeah, fall down with it.
Right, exactly. Down over a ledge.
Yeah.
So when I'm looking for a track and I find a buck I want to track or a buck I want to scout out and look for and do my homework and make sure he's in that block of woods, I'm going to walk his track out. When I find it, I'm going to walk his track out 100 yards in the woods. The reason I go 100 yards is that 100 yards gives me a visual in my head how he walks, his stride, everything. So when I find his track on the other side of that mountain and I walk it in a little ways, I go, yep, that's him. Because they all walk different. Some drag their feet straight, some will hook a little bit. Every buck's different.
So sometimes as they get older, they always have funny toes on them.
Right.
The one will kink out, one will be more rounded. So now we're talking about the tracks. How do you tell a swamp buck that lived in the swamp all summer over a mountain buck? By looking at his feet. It's pretty simple. The mountain buck got rounded toes. The one that lived in the swamp all summer, he's got straight
Pointy
toes
feet.
sticking out.
Right.
And that means he's got a dark brown rack on. He's been rubbing spruce trees or something. If they rub a lot of spruce trees, their antlers will be darker.
Yeah.
The ones that live out in the clear cut, they're ivory looking.
Rubbing
They stand
hardwoods.
out better when they're running too.
Guys always told me, they says, I'd shoot a deer with white horns. He goes, oh, he laid out on Hardwood Ridge. And I'm thinking, well, it's only been 6 weeks since he rubbed his velvet off, and we haven't even had many sunny days. So
I don't
that's
think.
a wise tale. It's
Yeah,
what
I
they
don't-
rub their horns on.
Yeah, I don't think it's the sun that does it. No.
No. But anyway, the other thing about going in 100 yards is I find that most guys are lazy, and they go along looking for a track, and if they see some guys already checked it out, they're going to keep driving. And especially if they walk in 50 feet and they go, oh, this guy's going, he's serious. So they just keep going and looking. And so that kind of, and I'll put my initials in it. And that's something I don't know if anybody does anymore, but back in the day when everybody respected each other, I'd find a big buck track, somebody checked it, and it'd say LB. Well, LB meant one of 4 guys back then. Your dad, your 2 brothers, or you. So I kept going. I knew they were looking for that deer.
I got to tell you a little secret too.
Go ahead.
Sometimes I walked in one morning I found like 14 buck tracks on the Parlin Pond Road. Last one I found, I took that one. I went in 100 yards, checked it out, and I come back and I told the guy with me, see you later. If I ain't back, fire a shot at 4 o'clock. There was no compasses back then. That one went 268 on Parlin Pond Road. But
I
anyways,
remember that one.
so when I follow a deer track in and I come back out,
I wasn't going to give that secret. But that is what we do. Because the average guy pulls up and they go, oh, they've gone on that track.
they took it.
They took it. We walk out backwards.
See, you may want to track later because maybe you didn't find anything. That's
Right.
why you do that. So I apologize for doing that if you guys seen it on the road somewhere. Tricks of the trade.
Yeah, it is. Switching on tracks. So, yeah, especially sometimes if I can't find the buck I'm looking for, and it's getting later in the day, and I find a pretty decent buck, and I say, I'll go follow him, and I know I'm running out of time, so I said I'll go follow him, because lots of times a smaller buck will bring you to a really big buck because he's headed for the does. And the only thing a big buck in November on his mind is he's looking for does. And the reason they travel so much ground is they're going from doe group to doe group to doe group, because the does are always in little pockets. Okay, there'll be 2 or 3 does on this mountain, and then 2 or 3 does down in this little swamp right here, and then 4 or 5 does. So a big buck will go 10, 15 miles in a night like nothing. 2 miles an hour on a buck track's average. And you ask Lanny, back in the day, he and I, 20 miles on a buck track in our 20s and 30s was nothing. And
Found a big buck track there. 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I said to Shane, let's just go back on the truck. I'll come back tomorrow. I said, I don't think this deer's going anywhere. There's a lot of does on this ridge right here. I came back in the morning and took his track. That deer never laid down all night long. All he did is fight with the other bucks and chase does all over the place. Finally, I got sick of following his track because they're going east and started him over here, and he's headed back this way. I just went up. I said, I'm all done with him about 11 o'clock. I said, I've had enough of this going back and forth. So I headed across like that. Just made a beeline right straight across the side of that thing. I got over towards the end, heard some noise. I looked down, 2 does come flying by. I reached down and went click. I got ready. Here he comes. But that buck never laid down all night. So if you'd have kept tracking him, I probably would have never caught up
Never
with
caught
that
up
deer.
with him. Right.
He was busy fighting with the other deer, and there was a lot of bucks in there that year, and they're busy scrapping, and those are run to death. And so I plugged him and went back to the truck and pleaded, I'm tired out, somebody come and help me drag.
You know, I've never shot a big buck when somebody hasn't wanted to come help me drag. A true hunter will always come help another hunter drag.
Well, see, when you get older, it gets easier because you go, boy, I don't know, I had some chest pains today. Without a doubt, if there's any young guys around, don't drag it. We'll get it for you.
Exactly. Right.
So I was quite a while there. I didn't drag any deer out. And then I was in Ontario, and everybody went home on me. So now it's my turn to shoot a deer. And Shane and I was there alone, and I finally shot one. And Shane says, well, I'll help you drag it. Well, he dragged it from here to that post, and his back hurt. And it wasn't that far. It was a little over a mile. And I started dragging it, and I was doing pretty good. And he looked at me and says, you faker.
I got to remember that. Yeah.
He was all mad at me because I've been faking it for 2 or 3 years.
Your back got better, though.
Yeah, my back was fine.
You want me to put this clip on and then go on the next up?
Sure.
All right.
Yeah.
See the size of that track?
Yeah.
See how Chris, see where he hit last night? See how he pushed the snow forward?
Mm-hmm.
See that?
What time was this made?
Oh, it's not even froze. It's still wet in there. Could be anywhere from 4 hours to a half hour ago. I mean, it got crispy last night. And he's been through here after it froze. See where he's
Look
pushing
at the dust there.
See where he's pushing that snow dust on top?
Yeah.
That's the one we're after right here. That's him. I'm pretty sure that's him. See the size of that front foot?
Yep.
Pretty square. Yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's him. Huh?
We got on him right here.
Yeah, we'll go up the road a little ways, take a look, and then I think we might get on him.
Yeah, I ended up killing that deer. And we went up the road a ways and did our homework. And I knew that road made a loop, and there was a brook right there, and they always crossed by that bridge. And sure enough, there was this track by that bridge, and it went up onto a mountain. And I ended up following his track and killing him later that day up on that mountain. But so you had a little bit of crust on that snow, and aging a track, that's the hardest thing I think everybody asks me. How do you age a track? How do you age a track? So number one thing is you want to pay attention to the weather, what happened yesterday, all night long, and that morning, because the weather constantly changes in the North Country. And you could have had a snow dust at midnight. Well, that's what happened there. We had that snow dust about midnight. So I found his track about 6 in the morning, and it snowed from midnight to about 2 a.m. And his track had no snow dust on it. And I knew that it had gotten cold, because usually, it gets cold as the night goes on, gets a little colder, and then it might warm up towards morning or whatever. And he was pushing that snow dust onto that crust. So right there, I knew. I said, that track's probably 4 or 5 hours old at the most. I said, he could be a half hour old. So I knew I wasn't in for much of a chase, and I got on him, and it worked out.
So what kind of track do you normally look for?
I look for what I call the magic track. And the magic track is big and fresh. Magic track, so big and fresh. You don't find many of them, but when you do, it's go time.
I've tracked some that are a day old, 2 days old, if they're going up. If they're going down, forget it. That don't work good. Say you're going up a mountain and you're coming across and there's a big buck track going down and it looks like it's 2 days old. You can follow it, but chances are you may not catch that deer. But if he's going up, he may be tired out and he's going to go up there and feed and lay down for a day. You have a bed here and a bed over there, way up in the spruces. So the biggest buck I shot in Maine on 71 or 2 was the biggest buck that was shot in Maine that year. I took that track, it was a day old. And the reason I know it was a day old, because my dad see the deer the day before, and he said, boy, that was one big deer. He didn't take the track because he'd already shot a deer. So I took the track from where he saw it the day before, and I tracked that deer, and he fooled me at first. Because I'm looking at the track, and I'm going, wow, he didn't have big feet. He had feet of a normal 180-pound buck, but he was a big one. When I cut the deer up, I got 1 cup of fat. He didn't have no fat on him. He was all muscle. And he weighed 272. But that deer, I started him that morning, and I caught him at noon way up on Katahdin Ironworks
Yeah.
above Greenville. That was a big buck. I started dragging him, and I said to myself, boy, that was the first day I hunted in Maine. I started dragging him. I go from here over to there, and I get all tired out. I said, well, I can't drag anymore. What the hell's wrong with this thing? So my dad shot a buck the day before, and we finally get that deer down, and I said, boy, Pop, your deer ain't going to make 200 this year. Look at him. Of course, we're looking at the one I shot. So we went down to weigh him in Greenville, and we weighed his first, or mine first, and I looked at the scales, and I said, what? So I went in and gave the guy hell, because I said, your scales are way off, buddy. And what are you talking about? I said, I got a deer out there. It says he weighs 270-some pounds, and I don't think so. So he goes out and looks at the deer, and he goes, holy shit, look at the size of this thing.
Scales are on.
Yeah. My dad's deer went 225, and that's why it looks so much different. But
So getting back at that, I think they want to know. So some big bucks will have really small feet. We killed one, me and my buddy Sandy killed one like 4 or 5 years ago, and we didn't take that track for 2 days. And we killed that deer, and he ended up weighing 230. And so the older a deer gets, when they got small feet, I always look for the width of the stance. And when it's about 8-9 inches between their feet, in between them, not the outside, that tells me that deer is older than 5 years old right there. Because the older a deer gets, the more his body widens out.
Yeah, they get a wide chest on them. You can actually tell a buck track just driving down the road at 50 miles an hour if the snow conditions are right. You're looking, he's going up a bank, put the brakes on, and you go back, yep, that's a nice one right there.
Yeah, you don't even have to get out and look at it.
You don't even have to get out and look.
Yeah.
I've done that over and over. I've shot you. Well, if you guys only knew how many bucks I've shot by driving down the road, getting out, and go get them. And some of them are easy, some are hard. But you know, the easiest bucks I've ever shot, believe it or not, and you ain't going to believe this, is the old ones. They don't want to run no more.
They don't want to go anywhere.
They don't go nowhere. They'll run 100 yards and they'll start walking. I've come back when I was younger, I'd come right up behind them and get them that way. They didn't even know you're back there. As long as you made a good, as long as you keep the pace up, catch right up with them in a hurry. Especially if they go across a little down in and they go up another side of this ridge over there, maybe 200 yards away. I've shot a bunch of them going up like that, catching up with them. They don't even know you're behind them. But that was when I was younger. That day's gone now.
You got that video of me wringing my boots out?
Oh, yeah, we got
Just to show how Lanny and I, this is how serious you have to be deer hunting, and he and I both done it sometimes multiple days in a row crossing rivers. I just crossed a river that was about 150 feet across it, and it ended up being right up to my pockets.
Things shrivel up. Things shrivel up when that happens.
Did you hear that?
Cross that river. We go to the deep spot forward down.
Yeah, that looks familiar. All the tape in the world ain't gonna make no difference. I was wanting to design a boot that you could unroll it way up.
Stay after these bucks. You get an hour for that. You can catch up in them.
The reason I wrung my boots out is the water was making so much sloshing noise. I said, this deer's gonna hear me. Because otherwise I wouldn't have wrung him out and I kept going. So I had to dump my boots out and then get back on his track. So that happens a lot, because a lot of them big bucks, when you get on them and you get pushing them, this is what they learn from predators, mostly coyotes, is to get away from a coyote. They cross river or water, so they think they're going to lose us. And 9 times out of 10, when you cross a river like that with a buck, he's going to slow up on the other side. He's going to stop. And I couldn't even tell you how many I've shot after they've crossed a stream or a river where they just stopped and they said, I lost him, and they just started walking, and boom, I caught up to him and ended up killing him. You done that once or twice?
Remember where they used to cross the Dead River and you go up a little ways, there's a little island up there at the forks? You
Yeah.
drive way up in, there's a little island after you get up in there a ways. Well, we hit we shot at a running buck and we hit him and he went
Didn't
in.
you have that in the video?
No,
You didn't?
no, it's
No.
different. I only told this story a few times.
Okay.
But anyways, Landon and I hit the deer. Landon was with me that day. He was bleeding pretty good. He went into Dead River. I looked way down there and I could see him standing on the other side, just like you said, standing over on that side. Well, I pulled up, must have been 300 yards down there or further. I touched one off and he ran over on the island. So Landon and I go down there, and this is what I told him. I said, now listen, it's cold today. I'm going to go over on that island and you don't follow me. You stay over here and I'm going to go around the backside and I'm going to push that deer off over here. Because I didn't know I hit the deer. So I get halfway across the freaking rapids here and it's up to here. I look behind me and it's him. I said, what are you doing here? So we got on the island and we jumped the deer out and the deer gets halfway across the rapids and guess who shoots it? I said, wait till he gets, he's excited, he's just a young guy.
Oh, yeah.
Don't shoot, wait till he gets on the shore. He shoots him right in the rapids and I said, oh no. So I'm going down the freaking rapids. I finally catch up with the deer and drag it on the shore. Meanwhile, the freaking Suburban is probably 2 miles away or more. And I'm completely soaked. And I didn't even bother gutting the deer out because the road's right there where you used to cross there.
Right.
So I said, we're going to leave the deer and we're going to head back to the rig because this ain't good because it's like almost zero out that day. So we got back and boy, just in time because we were getting cold and come back down and gutted the deer out. But
When you get, I notice a lot of guys, they get all concerned, they get wet when they're tracking. And as long as you keep moving, you're not going to get cold.
no, sometimes your wool jacket like that turns like a suit of armor. If it's cold enough out, it gets all frozen if you stand around a little bit, but you're still warm in there if you move a little bit.
What do you guys have for tips on closing the final gap?
So probably in the last 7 or 8 years more than anything, I started using a grunt call more. And I've learned every time when I think I'm within earshot of that buck, and I'm tracking him, and I feel like I'm getting close, and little details will tell me that, whether it's the murky water that he just went through, or just what he's doing in his track, he's slowing down, meandering, or he started feeding a little bit, I'll grunt. And in my opinion, you can't really over grunt because unless they make eye contact with you. If a buck makes eye contact with you, the grunting's over. He knows what you are, okay? But I'm gonna keep grunting at him every time that I think I'm within earshot. And you wouldn't believe the bucks in the last 7, 8 years that I've grunted back to me. And what's that done is it makes me selectable on deer I can shoot, because the older I got, I just want to kill big deer. I don't really care about killing a small deer or a small rack deer anymore. I'd rather put my time in and kill a real trophy buck that I put on my wall. And
Yep.
so grunting will suck those deer back to you, and it gives you a chance to judge them, rather than in the old days, I was on the track all day long, and as soon as I see a flag or a jump, just the tip of an antler, you were shooting, and you made sure you were shooting. And so I think grunting is really important nowadays, and Neil's got a little video here.
In this clip, I was lucky enough to meet up with Rick the weekend or 2 weekends before, I think it might have been, and he gave me an early Christmas present. So it happened to be his new signature grunt call, and I had a cameraman with me for the day, and so unfortunately you're not going to see the best part of the footage, because I'm still leaving that when the film comes out. But I basically was coming up on this buck on his track. He was with the doe. I saw the doe take off, and she went back in the tree line. So I happened to stop and I pulled up and I'm looking through the scope trying to see if I can pick out another deer because I knew that buck had to be there with her. And so I said, well, let me pull out the grunt tube because he's right there, and grunt it a couple times as you'll see. And he turns and comes right back on that track right towards me within 20 yards. So as Rick's saying, it works to be able to grunt him back, especially when you know that you're that close. So that's what the clip's going to show.
See how he gave 2 aggressive grunts?
Right side of the screen there.
Yeah, there he is.
It's like Christmas. Look at this. Who's this guy? It's shot on film. You guys don't get to see it yet.
Are you teasing us?
A little bit. I'll show you Lanny after. Oh wow, that feels nice. It has that throaty, like clicking sound to it. I like that.
I like it.
Yeah.
It's like a growly sound.
Sounds best to me when it's correct.
So yeah, Rick, if you want to talk about that.
So I brought my grunt call, and it's the most authentic grunt call I've ever picked up in my life. And so I decided to put my name on it. I called Mark and I said, hey, why don't we put my name on this? And he said, I think that's a great idea. But anyway,
What company makes it?
Nor'easter Game Calls. Okay, this is a mercenary with my name on it. He's got a lot of other calls he sells, and this is the one I decided to put my name on because it's the most affordable one, and he's got other fancier ones if you want some colored ones, whatever. But anyway, I start off, and I give 2, anytime I stop or I'm gonna grunt, I give 2 aggressive short grunts, just brr, brr, and I'll stretch that tube like this. I'll give 2 aggressive grunts. Then I usually might end with just 2 little short grunts like that. So those 2 aggressive ones gets the buck's attention, especially if he's out there 100 yards. He's got to hear you or he's not coming back. So, and then I think those short grunts, those are like a tendon grunt, okay? I've watched deer all over, everywhere I've hunted, grunt and back and forth and all the sounds they make. And another thing is, I don't really think you can mess up a grunt call because I've heard so many sounds that a deer's made between Saskatchewan and all these places I've hunted over the years, just watching bucks chase does all day long sometimes, that deers have hundreds of vocal sounds. So don't be afraid that you're gonna mess it up. Just practice with that call when you're not hunting and you'll get better at it.
Well, I'm going to tell you one thing. I've never used a grunt call, but I'm going to try it next year.
I'm gonna set you up with one.
He's going to set me up with one. I can't wait. But anyways, how I've shot a lot of deer through the years is being sneaking up on them, and you can't make any noise. And if it takes you a half hour to go to 100 yards, that's what you got to do. And I'll tell you one of the stories that I remember is I was tracking this buck over in Rangeley, shot him all over the state. You know that?
I do know that.
But anyway,
You gotta go with this snow, and if you can't find a big buck, you just gotta keep looking and find a big buck.
that's where I'm getting at that. But anyways, I found a buck track. I helped a bunch of other people shoot deer and it was my turn. So I'm all by myself. I followed this deer for half a day, and he went up this mountain. Track him up there, and we're going across the spruces, kind of flat up there. And I got to this spot right here. I hadn't made any noise. It was one of them days where I didn't make no noise. And if I went this way, it's going to be noisy. I'm looking over here, maybe over there. Sometimes you got to go all the way around until you don't make no noise, but take your time at it. If the deer's laying down, you got a long time to go a little ways. So I take 2 steps and I'm looking here, and all of a sudden I spotted something right there underneath the spruce tree. The snow had laid all the limbs down, and the buck was laying right there. That's how quiet I was. And what made me spot him under there, when he was breathing, his head was going back and forth a little bit like this. I said, what? I've shot a few of them like that. A bunch of them I shot, walk right up on them, but you got to be quiet and you got to have the right conditions. So that deer, he was sleeping, and I know that he had a bad dream about that. He probably dreamt he was getting shot or something. But it was a nice 10-pointer.
That's why he was breathing hard.
But we call that the death creep. And that was before they had tutors and stuff like
Well,
that.
you still got to do the death creep, even if you're using a grunt call, though, because it's hard to gauge where that deer is. But
Right.
I will tell you, the grunt tube, if you're in earshot of that deer, he's probably going to come investigate.
Well, I'm going to try that, and I'll tell you, I got another story about this, and I'm over by the 2 barn doors, where that is.
I don't know where that is.
Oh, well, anyway, it don't matter. So I go up there, and there's a plantation up there, pine trees. And this buck had been chasing a doe around. She didn't want nothing to do with him. It was on crunchy snow. Snow was bad crunchy. And I said, I know that buck's right up in here somewheres, and I know he's hearing me. So I'm thinking to myself, I can't sneak up on him, especially in these these pine trees. I looked over, and there was a rock right there. I said, I'm going to go sit on that rock and let him think about listening to me walk around down here, because I know he's lost the doe. I sat there for 10 minutes, and I looked up through the pine trees, and he had his head down. I see the antlers sticking out. Yeah, he's coming. And he walked right up from here, around a pine tree from here to that table. And when he got right there, he turned around and looked at me, and I was already aiming like this. And I called the powder burn time. So if you play it right, you can... See, it would have worked good with a grunt call, though. If I'd have tooted down here, he'd have come down a little quicker.
He might have. Definitely would have.
Oh.
Yep. All right, well, because we're getting close on time, I just kind of came up with a question for you guys. I mean, as 2 ambassadors of tracking and hunting in general, to be on stage at the same time, this is pretty special. So I guess for you guys, what I'd like to hear, and probably people in the audience would, is why you love tracking so much, what tracking means to you, and if you had any advice really to give to people, to encourage them to try it, and I guess why you love it so much. You can kind of share that stuff, Lanny and Rick.
Well, you go first, Rick. I'll go.
Well, like I said, watch it from a young age. I knew sitting in a deer stand, I was just going to be hours and hours of waiting, and I'm not a sit-still type of guy. So I took up tracking, and then I ran into him, and I had seen him in a magazine first, and I actually ran into him up north near my camp and started following him around and watching what he was doing, and I learned real quick at a young age that tracking a buck, to me, is the most satisfying. I got bucks. I don't know, 70 bucks mounted on my wall, and they all mean something, but the probably 35 that mean the most to me are the ones that I work my butt off, sometimes days and days, to track down and kill those big bucks. And the work to get them up that went into it, the work to get them out of the woods, it was just an adventure all day long. And anybody that tracks knows once you've taken it up and you've learned it, you can't quit. You just, it's like leaving a big buck track halfway through the day. You can't do it. You're on a 240-pound buck track, and you know he's out in front of it. And to give up on that, I just don't see how that's possible. But go ahead, Lanny.
Boy, I'll tell you what, tracking a deer, even you older fellows, like I'm 79 now, I'm still going to track deer next year. I don't care if I got to take baby steps. I'm going tracking deer. I've done it my whole life, and I know I don't seem talking to you that I'm an aggressive person, but I'm a very aggressive person. I grew up being aggressive, and I told everybody when I was this tall, I'm going to shoot big bucks when I get older. And everybody goes, well, you may seem that way, but that all came true to me. And the reason it came true to me, when I grew up, I asked everybody, how do you tell a buck track from a doe track? And nobody could tell me. So finally I learned how to do that. And tracking deer is just, I got countless stories. Too bad we couldn't be here another half hour or an hour, because I got stories to tell you that bucks I didn't think I could get tracking because they were leery. They moved around everybody. Nobody shot at them, but I got them at the end of the day by tracking. And it's just so much fun tracking a deer. I can't explain to you. Plus, if you track a big buck around and you lose the snow, guess what? He's going to take you through all these areas that the deer walk back, the natural runways. So if you want to sit afterwards, you go find those spots that you found when you were tracking and sit there, and a big buck's going to go by.
On bare ground, right?
On bare ground.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or if you got an elderly gentleman like myself, you could take him in there, sit right here, because sometime along early season, a big buck's going to go through here. Post rut, sitting don't work that good.
Yeah, exactly.
During the rut, they're running up and down the roads, and that's another story we can talk about later on. Him and I'll probably do more of this. So you can tell when the rut's over by just watching the logging road.
Go, keep talking. So there's a.
If you hit the logging roads quite a bit, you'll see where a buck track is running up and down the road. That means the rut's still going. They're chasing the does around. The minute they stop crossing the road, the rut's over.
So I want to tell one last story. So
Sure.
This is Jeff Greenleaf right here, and he drove all the way down from the Forks to show me this buck that night, and he was so damn happy and proud. And he called me up he says, "Hey, we're having a lobster stew at my camp. We didn't know if you'd want to come up for supper and talk to all the guys and meet them all and talk to us about deer track and everything." So I said, "Yeah, sure." And so I went up to his camp, and we shot the shit for a couple hours, and I gave them all kind of a little seminar at camp there, I guess, and gave them all the tracking tips that I had. And the first day it snowed, he goes out, never tracked a deer down in his life, and he kills this monster, scored 160 something inches, and the other guy in the camp shot a 10-pointer. So, that was pretty satisfying for me to go up and talk to those guys, teach those guys everything I knew, and then they went out and they actually did it. And I guarantee you, him and Dean are hooked for life. They probably won't ever sit again, so I ruined them from sitting. Raise your hand, Jeff.
If you guys got any questions, I don't see anybody coming in and doing the next show yet. We can push it if you want a little bit.
Anything like that?
Absolutely. Yeah. The way I track on crusty, crunchy snow is I don't put my heel down first and go crunch. I put my toe in first, kind of like a deer. It's quick steps, and sometimes that'll help. I've had a couple I think I've killed getting close to them that way.
Yeah, see right there. When he said push the toe in first. So now you got this much packy snow. It's not crunchy snow. It packs underneath your feet. And so you want to go the last 200 yards or 300 yards because the deer will hear that packing under your feet a long ways away. How you do that, you slide your toes in so you're not packing no snow, and you can sneak up on them that way in that packy snow. How are we doing, fellas? Are we doing all right?
Awesome.
Go ahead.
How about tracking in the smaller, flat woods, thick woods? Not the big woods like around,
Right down
like
around.
in Norwich Walk where you live.
Yeah. So those deer aren't going to range so far, okay? So I'm going to slow down on them smaller blocks of woods because they're not going to go out and cross those highways at night. They're in that 2 mile by 2 mile blocks of woods. So I'm going to run into that deer. I know I'm going to run into him in the daytime. So I actually do slow down a little bit if I'm in a smaller block of woods and I know he's in there.
If you're in pretty good shape and you don't start looking for the deer, like, going through the woods like this, because he could be 2 miles away, you got to figure out roughly when you're catching up with the deer sometimes. Sometimes that's hard. But just walk right along a good pace. Don't worry about it. So you had a question over here.
Yeah, how would you rate your success non-snow versus on snow?
Non-snow is kind of tough, but that's where when you track deer, I should have you do this. Well, you do this afterwards. You're younger.
Keep going.
So anyways, when you're tracking a deer the year before and you got no snow this year, you remember where these natural deer trails went. Just walk those and go real slow and stay off to the side a little bit if you want to. That's your best bet right there.
Yeah, you got to hunt pretty much those same crossings when you track.
Yeah.
Especially if you're familiar with a piece of woods over the last 4 or 5, 10 years, whatever, you learn those crossings that are just always the same. It's a genetic thing and generational.
You see the old scrapes?
Yeah. You see rubs on trees that are 10 years old and they're still rubbing them. Those are different bucks. That old one died and the new one took over.
Rick, you talked about the width of a gate of the deer.
buck and wondered what small track buck that has nice long gait. You said 8 or 9 inches between the front tracks. Do you have a number that you like to see between the front and back track, or?
Not really. No, I mean, if he's got a really wide stance, no matter how big his foot is, I will tell you one thing about the distance in his track. When I get on a buck and he's taking short steps, I know he's tired, especially post-rut. I'm going to kill that deer by the end of the day. Chances are he's in trouble. But a deer, you get on a buck and he's taking 4 or 5 foot strides, he's going somewhere. And sometimes I'll go a mile or so on a buck like that, and I realize I ain't going to catch this buck. I don't even have enough daylight. So I'll go back to the truck, go find another one.
You can't walk fast enough. You can't walk fast enough to keep up with them when they got that long stride.
No way.
If you ever watch them walk by, they're putting some miles on quick.
When you're tracking and it's windy, is there anything that you should absolutely not do, or how do you use the wind in your favor?
Tracking, you have no direct, you have no control over the wind tracking. So you basically got to stay on that buck. The only time I use the wind is when I'm going to leap. If he went to a high spot, he's one of them bucks that keeps looping and he's watching behind me. And I figured out, I said, next time I come to a little ridge or something where I think he's going to be standing looking at his back track, I'm going to leave the track and try to catch him. So I'm going to go downwind, always go downwind. I don't want to go upwind, because as I'm working my way while he's standing there watching me, he's going to catch my wind and he's gone. So I always go downwind, but other than that, tracking, you got no control of the wind. I don't worry about it.
No, don't worry about the wind. The only time you worry about it is like when I made a mistake getting too overconfident. I'm following this buck track around the ridge like this. When I get right here, the wind's going this way. And I know the deer's laid down up there. I know he is, because he fed so much down here, he's gone up there to lay down. And I said to myself, you know what, dummy, go back this way, go all the way around and come down on him, because I know he's right up there. So I said to myself, nah, it's pretty quiet today, and a bunch of stuff you can hide behind here, a bunch of boulders and stuff. So I'm sneaking up through there, and I got this great big boulder, and I know he's right here. So I went up behind this big boulder, took my safety off, and I peeked around like this, like I'm going to shoot him. And there his bed is, and running marks going that way. He smelt me, and he took off.
His instinct was right the first time.
Yeah. See, I should have walked around, but I too lazy and too overconfident.
Hey, Rick, when do you feel the best time for your scout?
Best time to scout during deer season.
Yep.
As soon as you get a snow, that's the best time to scout. And really, I've got most of my bucks for next year already scouted out from late season last year, because I know what made it through. Even if I've killed a deer, I'll take a ride up north sometimes, and Nance and I will take a ride up, and we'll just ride around. And especially as they're coming down to the yards or whatever, you're going to see all them big bucks, because you say, oh, there's 3 or 4 good ones still here. So I know they're there for next year, and that's what I'm going to be looking for.
Yeah, because what happens, the rut starts, and they could be 20 miles away. If you scout pre-season, the minute that rut starts, he may still be there, but probably not. He's probably gone somewhere.
How do you feel about scouting after hunting season?
So what?
How do you feel about scouting after hunting season for your next season?
Yeah, I do a little bit of that. Yeah, if I get time, like I said, I'll take a ride up and just loop around some logging roads or whatever and see what made it through for deer.
Because I'll have 10 or 12 bucks marked out every year on which ones I want to shoot.
You're right. Yeah, but like he said, some of those bucks migrate in to these yards and stuff, and you see what's left over, what made it, but they could be 20 miles away. They could have come from 20 miles away. So you got to broaden out your search when you get a snow and just start riding those logging roads and looking on those mountain ranges and try to find one of those big bucks. You're really not going to find that until the rut starts, till they start moving, because those big bucks like to stay on those mountaintops, and that's where they live all summer. So they ain't going to come down till they got a reason to.
See, they go up high in the summertime because the flies are bothering them. There's not so many flies way up on top. That's why a lot of times you go up there with a car and you see a bunch of deer up there. Anyways, folks, listen, we really appreciate you showing up. We got to go. You just whispered in my ear. We got to hit the road. So
Appreciate everybody for coming. I appreciate Lanny coming in.